Hello and welcome guys. Today we are back with another very exciting PowerPoint video. This time we're covering all of the cards that you need to know about, only the bare essentials from Modern Horizons 3 for the deck Amulettitan. I will say I'm not the first to get to a video like this. I was inspired by a video by G.R. Donkin, which I will link in the description below, which goes over in far more detail and puts into a tier list format the cards that Mr. Donkin thinks are relevant for Amulettitan. So if you want to check that out, then it'll be in the description below. And also, I'll remind you at the end of the video to go check it out. So don't leave now, because we've got a lot to talk about. And without further ado, let's start with the trash takes, the worst cards that we are going to see in Modern Horizons 3. And the first one is Urza's Cave. This card is 3 mana plus tapping itself, so essentially 4 mana to tutor a land into play. What are you thinking? We tutor 2 lands for 6 mana, and that card is Primeval Titan. We don't need another colorless source. We don't need this effect. We don't need it. Let it be gone. F. Horrible. Moving on. Next, we've got the card Sowing Mycospawn. 4 mana 3/3 that lets you tutor a land, or if you kick it for an extra 2 mana, you get to exile an opponent's land. This card is just slow, if I'm being completely honest. At 4 mana, we don't really care about the 3/3 body, unlike a deck like an Eldrazi deck, perhaps, where you're trying to build a critical mass of a battlefield presence. With Amulet, you don't really care what your battlefield looks like, unless it happens to have a Dryad and a Valakut, in which case you kind of care, or unless it has 2 or 1 copies of Amulet of Vigor, then you kind of care, but otherwise, you're just using your 3/3 to like chump block. It's like not even a meaningful threat. What are we doing? Just cast your Dryads and Titans. Don't be messing around with this. Maybe if you're playing an Eldrazi deck, Sowing Mycospawn will make the cut, but in Amulet, it's a D from me. Next, we've got our honorable mentions. These are cards that I thought were personally interesting, possibly worth including, definitely worth mentioning, and those cards include Null Elemental Blast. You might be saying, wait a minute, but this is a colorless spell. Well, guess what? In Amulettitan, we have tons of colorless lands. We have Urza Saga, we have the Mycosynth Gardens, we have all of our haste lands. Some of us even play Kessig Wolf Run. We have tons of ways to make colorless. The problem is this card hits only multicolored spells and permanents. And you can see here, this is just the couple that I noticed from the top 50 most played cards in Modern on MTG Goldfish. And that includes a smattering of red-black cards, where your hand doesn't matter at all because they're just going to rip it apart with Thoughtseize and Grief, and then you're going to be stuck with this useless counterspell in hand, and then some random cards like Gigantha, 3 Fairy, Expressive Iteration. It's just not good enough right now. Yeah, you could kill like a Wrenn and 6 if anybody still plays that card. It definitely sees a little bit of play, but like it's not broad enough for us to be playing in the sideboard, but it is an option, it's worth mentioning, and for that reason, it gets a C. Next, we've got Annoyed Altasaur, a card that is near and dear to my heart. 7 mana, 6/5, Reach, Trample, Cascade. If you have played Pauper, you'll know that this card is absolutely insane. However, is it insane in Modern? Well, I personally, having not played it in Modern, think the answer to that question is going to be probably not. At 7 mana, a 6/5 Reach Trampler is pretty much just Colossal Dreadmaw. That is not winning games on its own. And then you're really relying on the Cascade to hit something meaningful and good, like a Titan or a Ring, in order to make it work. If you happen to hit a Grazer, a redundant Amulet, or an Explorer that just cantrips you into another land and doesn't really do much, which I have done several times in Pauper myself, in some brews that I've played, it's just not good enough. You're going to feel underwhelmed. As excited as I am for this card, it just probably will not make the cut. That said, it's super sweet, and it's a dinosaur. Hear me out. It's a dinosaur. Does that sway you? No, it's a C+, unfortunately. Next, we've got Malevolent Rumble, a card that was brought to my attention by some people on Twitter, nonetheless. And the thing that makes this card interesting is it allows you to dig for a permanent that could be a Ring, an Amulet, a threat like a Primeval Titan. And it also happens to make a little Eldrazi spawn you can use to either chump block or ramp you into that turn 3 Ring. If you would play turn 2 Rumble, you can play turn 3 Ring and find the Ring off of the Rumble itself. That's kind of a compelling play pattern, but the reality is this card going to replace anything that we're currently playing? Is it better than Explorer even? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. It's an interesting card nonetheless, so it gets a C+ from me. Worth a consider, probably not going to be played. Moving on, we have a card that I think only me on the entire planet is even talking about or thinking about, and that card is Stump Stomp. Red-green, dual land on the backside that enters tapped, and a removal spell on the front. The thing that's unique about this card is Amulet does not usually get access to a lot of removal spells, and for that reason, Stump Stomp is super interesting as it allows you to play main deckable removal spells that can just take up a land slot and don't cause you to draw a bunch of dead cards late in the game. So an effect like that is super unique. I don't, to my knowledge, think that we've had anything like this before, and because of that, I think it's worth a consideration. Will it make the cut? I think most players look at this card and say, oh, it's a fight effect, oh, those are always bad, and we'll look over it, and I don't necessarily think it makes the cut, but it's definitely a lot better than people are probably giving it credit for in their mind, and technically it's a mono green card, because you don't even have to have the red to cast it, but if your opponent has a Magus of the Moon in play, and you can use Stump Stomp to kill that Magus, say with a Dryad on board or something like that, then you're going to be a very happy camper. And otherwise, it's just a land. So, super unique card. I give it a B for effort. Do I expect it to see play? Probably not, but maybe it's worth a consideration. Maybe give it a shot. Next, we have the card Arena of Glory, a land that at first I thought just straight up tapped for 2 mana when you exert it, which is not the case. It's 1 and tap the Arena, which is a total of 2 lands to make 2 mana, so it's mana parity, which I don't love. And then on top of that, it doesn't play well with cards like Castle Garenbrig, where if you try to filter the mana into Castle to activate it to get to 6, then you can't haste your Titan off of the red mana, which kind of sucks. And on top of that, if you were to cast your Primeval Titan, you need to be able to search for your haste land off the Titan ETB trigger to be able to attack with your Titan. This land will not let you do that. You have to play 3 or 4 copies in the main board to be able to consistently have it in order to cast your Titan with it. That said, if you happen to be playing a Primeval Titan deck that is not playing Amulet of Vigor for whatever reason, say you're playing mono green Valakut, or you're playing a red-green Scapeshift deck that is very Primeval Titan focused, I could definitely see this land making the cut. I don't know, it's kind of middling, but for now, since it doesn't really have a super clear home, I'm looking at the card as maybe a B+. Next, we've got a very potent sideboard card, which is Collective Resistance. 2 mana with Escalate. You can kill an artifact or enchantment, or give a creature hexproof or indestructible until end of turn. This is basically just mono green Wear and Tear, hitting both an artifact and enchantment for 3 mana. Very powerful effect against us, maybe a very powerful effect for us. That said, is this card ever going to see play over Force of Vigor? I'm thinking maybe not. It's a little better than Force of Vigor with the regard that it doesn't cost you the extra card from hand, and you can just cast it on turn 2, say to kill your opponent's Urza Saga and feel very proud of yourself, and then you can always escalate it to hit 2 things. I just don't think that this card is replacing Force of Vigor, but it is an option, especially for those of you who are not trying to pay for Force of Vigor. I know at one point it was very expensive. It's a very good option, and it does have its own merit, so I'm giving it a C+. And finally, we have gotten to what is the meat of the video, probably what you are most excited to see, and that is the objectively good cards that you almost certainly will be seeing people play in Amulet, if not playing yourself. And the first of those cards is, ha, gotcha! You thought I was going to talk about a card? No! Hit the subscribe button! I've done the work so that you would do it. Hit the subscribe button, let's go! Disciple of Freyalise, or probably more commonly, Garden of Freyalise. That's right, a pactable green land that can enter untap, not something we've had access to before. I know a lot of people are high on the card and will be playing a copy just because it expands what you can do with Summoner's Pact. In my personal experience, having played the deck quite a bit, I don't find myself needing to pact for an untapped green land that crazy amount of times that makes me want to play this card. Like, what are we cutting for it? Yet another green source? Are we going down to 1 basic forest now? Like, I don't know, guys. I don't know. And 3 damage, it does add up, especially if you have to pick it up and replay it. The creature side of this basically doesn't matter, but it's vaguely relevant if you want to gain life and outpace the damage that One Ring is doing to you or something like that. As a pactable land, it is definitely a respectable choice. You will probably not see more than one of these. Let me take that back. You will definitely not be seeing more than one of these being played, but it's a very solid option, one that we didn't have before, and you will be seeing, and that is a B rating from me. Next, we have the card Shifting Woodland. This is probably the most powerful land they've printed since Field of the Dead, and Shifting Woodland does something extremely unique, and this card is insane. A spell land that lets you copy a permanent from your graveyard. That could be a One Ring, which you then tap the woodland immediately to draw a card, or multiple cards if you've done it multiple turns in a row, and not lose the life. Sounds a little mana intensive, but it's definitely one way to do it. Or you could just pay 4 mana, not including the woodland itself, to turn it into a Primeval Titan and swing sideways with it and be able to attack for 6 and search for some lands and keep the ball rolling if your opponent does happen to kill your Primeval Titan. And for that reason, I think it could potentially see play as a 1-of. The problem is Delirium is not particularly easy to set up in Amulet, despite the fact that everyone wants to pretend like Delirium is no big deal, we'll just figure it out. I think it's a huge deal. Sure, if you sacrifice an Urza Saga, then you'll have enchantment and land in the graveyard. That's great. Okay, what next? Are you going to cast a Summoner's Pact so you have to pay for next turn and not be able to use your woodland just to be able to Delirium at this turn? Like, are you going to rely on your opponent having killed a creature or discarded something from your hand, like a creature or an amulet or something, or legend ruling a One Ring? Are you playing Mishra's Bauble now? Like, how are we making this card work? I think it's a very valid question and one that deserves to be answered. And on top of that, I think this card is probably going to see play as a 1 or 2 of, if at all, at Amulet. I think mostly you're going to be seeing this card as a 4 of in a brand new deck that is putting cards into its graveyard intentionally and is copying maybe something like Omniscience or whatever the heck, I don't know. You build the deck, not me. That said, an Amulet, in the context of Amulettitan as a deck, I give it a B, because you'll probably see it, but I don't see it being a stock inclusion moving forward. And that brings us to what is one of my favorite cards in the set. That card is Flare of Cultivation, a cultivate that you can cast for 0 mana by sacrificing a non-token green creature from play in order to free cast it from your hand. Obviously, if you go turn 1 Arboreal Grazer, put a land into play, free cast Flare of Cultivation to put a 3rd land into play, and then have your untapped land source ready to go for turn 2 to just slam a One Ring, or say a Yawgmoth or something like that, obviously that's going to be insane and very much worth considering. However, it's not free to play this card. We need additional 1-drops that we're playing in order to make this work. Just 4 Arboreal Grazers is not going to be good enough, because if half the time this card is just Cultivate, which is a card that I've actually tried to play in Amulet, especially when Blood Moon decks were popular, this card will not impact the battlefield. It's a horrible top deck if you draw multiples going in the late game, and it's really at its best on turn 1, and honestly probably at its best in a deck like Yawgmoth that has Grazers and Young Wolves to sacrifice, Undying shenanigans that let you get value out of it. In Amulet, we don't even have a backup 1-mana green creature to sacrifice. We have Arboreal Grazer and Elvish Pioneer? How many basic lands are you playing to make that work? You probably need like 16. Good luck. You could play Soccer Tribe Scout and then tap it on turn 2 before you flare, I guess. You could play Elvish Reclaimer and sacrifice it to Flare of Cultivation. Like, I'm not really seeing the direction here. What is the 1-drop that you're playing with Flare to make it work that isn't just Arboreal Grazer? And yes, I do think we need a 1-drop that is not Arboreal Grazer to make this card work in Amulet. And that is the reason why I'm giving it a B+. Clearly a top tier in terms of power level card, but will it make the cut in Amulet? Somebody's got to find that creature for me. If you find the creature and drop it in the comments, I will play your exact 60 card deck list and show off the 5-0 skills of Flare of Cultivation. Next, we've got what is unusually probably the most powerful card for Amulettitan in the set, in the form of an innocuous 2-mana Bestow enchantment creature. Yes, you heard that right. This innocuous creature allows you to enchant a Dryad or Grazer with a Amulet already in play, and then you play a bounce land, float 2 mana, and then make a copy of your Dryad or Grazer, thus allowing you to put another bounce land into play, or to make another Dryad and then play another bounce land for turn using the Dryad, and then make another Dryad and play another bounce land and make another Dryad and play another bounce land, and so on and so forth. A similar thing with Grazer. This lets you make infinite creatures with Arboreal Grazer and Dryad, and it lets you make quote-unquote infinite Titans, obviously restricted by the number of lands that are in your deck, but let's be honest, once you get above 2 Primeval Titans, the game is pretty much over unless your opponent just sweeps the battlefield. And in that case, you still get a lowly little 1/1 creature that has this landfall ability that lets you make additional green insects. I guarantee you'll see this card as a 1-of, at the very least, as a packed target, to be able to make infinite creatures, basically build your own Snaring Bridge. Your opponent can never get through with damage, especially with a Grazer, which has reach. Or, just infinite Dryads getting infinite land drops and allowing you to go absolutely crazy with Valakut, or, have as much mana as you want in any given turn. That seems pretty good. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you think about it, but having infinite mana and infinite Dryads sounds pretty fun to me. And you can just pack up your 1 copy of Springheart to do so. Or you could be an absolute mad person and play 4 copies of this possibly broken card. That is right. I'm calling it now. This is an A+, the best card you will see for Amulettitan in the set. And there you have it. That is my evaluation of Modern Horizons 3. It's over. Let me know down in the comments below if there are any cards that I missed from the set that you are excited to see or play with. Go watch J.R. Duncan's video. I mentioned it in the comments below. If you didn't already subscribe, then what are you even doing? And this is Redface Menace, signing off.